Welcome to Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. A building with four doors, whatever you like to call it, a fourplex, a four-family building, a quad, has a distinct set of advantages in the real estate investing world. It resides on the edge of the coin between single-family homes and larger apartment buildings. We're talking fourplexes today on Get Rich Education. The company that's provided our listeners with more loans than anyone is Ridge Lending Group, NMLS 42056. You can finance more than 10 single families up to fourplexes. Serving most U.S. states, their knowledge and experience leads to your financial freedom. They're number one in the investment space. Pre-qualify and then chat with President Chaley Ridge personally. Start on your next investment property loan right now at ridgelendinggroup.com. Finally, Total Control Financial gives you checkbook control of your 401k and IRA money to invest in real estate. It's time to get your retirement money into your own checking account, but you've got to avoid the little-known tax that you'll pay with any self-directed IRA. Instead, it's time for the QRP. Learn more and get your free copy of the QRP book by text messaging QRP in all capital letters to 72,000.
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE, from Portland, Maine to Portland, Oregon, and across 188 nations worldwide. I'm Keith Weinhold. This is Get Rich Education, and I think you know that part of my story is that I began in real estate investing with a fourplex building. That property was built in 1983, and one thing that I can tell you about the neighborhood that fourplex was in is that it's basically a fourplex neighborhood, and whatever I did to make my property look pretty, it still looked pretty junky in the surrounding neighborhood. Now, it was a safe neighborhood, but yeah, junky. Some of the dumpsters are overflowing with trash blowing around usually. Some tenant looks like they're often parking their motorcycle on the grass so that they can see it from their unit. But it looked much like it did because every property on that street was occupied by a renter, and then there were a dozen different building owner investors along that same street. Well, I can tell you that today, nothing has changed over there on that street. Sometimes I still drive to that same fourplex neighborhood, and it still looks junky. And then you have to think about the type of tenant that look attracts. Well, Fourplexes has some attributes that provide you with some unique advantages as the investor owner. But one group, the Fourplex Investment Group, they start with a clean slate in developing new construction fourplex areas, and they've headed off the blight and some of these problems that come with what you think of as a traditional fourplex or multifamily neighborhood. In fact, their model has become so favorable to the extent that they'll have 1,000 doors coming online next year. So let's learn more about fourplexes and then hear about the Fourplex Investment Group's, or FIG's, well-thought-out structure. We'll discuss where the projects are. You heard Steve Olson from FIG here with me about a year and a half ago. They offer investor-oriented projects in Texas, Idaho, Utah, and today he's going to reveal a new market that they're operating in. Just like me, today's guest has been in real estate since 2002. He completed his first real estate deal while still in college, and since he's really done a number of wide-ranging real estate activities like the sale of raw land, bulk foreclosure packages, single-family flips, and single-family and small multifamily rentals. Today, he's the director of sales at the Fourplex Investment Group, otherwise known as FIG, and they give you a chance to buy these really nice-looking brand new construction fourplexes in the Salt Lake City, Houston, and Boise areas. Welcome to Get Rich Education, Steve Olson.
Hey, I'm happy to be back. It's been a long time since we chatted last.
It has been a good year and a half or so. Steve, I think that more people want fourplexes, but frankly, I just don't see a whole lot available. Now, single family homes and duplexes and apartment buildings, they can all be great, and they sure do have their own set of distinct advantages. Often when a provider shows me around the real estate market in their city, when I'm doing a tour with them, I ask about fourplexes, but they have few or none. And it seems like it's often due to permitting issues. So you really help fill a need. So from your vantage point, tell us more about the pros and cons of fourplex investing.
When you look at a fourplex, there's a coin to real estate investing. One side is single family homes. The other side is apartment buildings. And of course, that's storage and a bunch of other types. But when we're talking about residential, that's what you talk about. But a fourplex is really on the edge of that coin.
Yeah.
Because you get a lot of the attributes from both sides of it when you talk about fourplexes. People really like them. One reason being is that you can use that true 30-year fixed rate financing to buy a fourplex. Whereas on an apartment building, you're going to have an adjustable mortgage. You're going to have a commercial loan. And granted, there are plenty of pros to that. But some people don't want to be in an asset that they're expected to refinance or sell or pay off or whatever every 7 to 10 years, which is typical what you see in commercial. With a fourplex, we generally feel like it's pretty recession resistant.
Yeah.
I would never say something is recession proof, right? I lived through that. But recession resistant with that 30-year fixed rate mortgage, if you can make the payment, you're good to go here because nobody is expecting you to pay that off. And in addition, you have those 4 income streams coming in that allow you to service your debt and get through a more difficult time. I think another reason people prefer them too is with that conventional financing, we could call that Fannie and Freddie financing is how most people refer to it. You can get up to 10 of those loans in your name. Only 10. It doesn't matter if you're Warren Buffett. If you have 10 mortgages, you don't get number 11 on a conventional finance deal. I'm sure he'd probably get some kind of sweetheart deal if you're Buffett. But for the rest of us, we're capped out at 10. So a lot of people feel like if that's the best kind of financing, I want to maximize my door count. So in theory, you could get up to 40 doors because each fourplex only counts as one loan. But the second you roll over to 5 units, now you're commercial. If you're doing 1 or 2 unit properties, in theory, you're leaving some doors on the table.
100%. It's really optimizing what some people call, those Fannie Freddie loans or those golden ticket loans. When you put fourplexes in there, not only the interest rates lower than they are with 5+ unit buildings, but like you mentioned, you have that baked in certainty of knowing what your biggest expense is going to be each month, your principal and interest for 30 years, 3 decades.
Yes, it's baked in certainty. And you remember, this was probably more of a problem in the single family world, but back in 2008, when the bottom fell out of everything, and I don't think we're going to have a situation that's that bad. That's my opinion. But a big problem was adjustable mortgages. People waking up one day and finding out now their mortgage is $1,500 more than it was before. So we have that baked in certainty. If you keep some reserves, you're really likely to be able to weather any kind of storm that comes along in the event of a recession.
Now, you offer a brand new construction product with your fourplexes, and existing construction versus new construction each have their own set of advantages and disadvantages. So tell us about why you find the advantages of new construction and some of those pros and cons of new construction for an investor in rental property.
I'll speak to that generally, Keith, for a minute, and then I'll probably zero in on FIG specifically. So you kind of said it earlier. When you go into many of these markets across the U.S. and you look at existing built fourplexes, you're probably going to be underwhelmed. First of all, there's not a lot of them. People are holding on to them, right? But they're old. A lot of these things were built in the 70s or the 80s. It was really popular then. And like you said, permitting and a variety of other things made it so they just weren't built much more after that. It's kind of more on a one-off basis. It doesn't mean they're bad opportunities. It's just they're old, and that comes with it. It's a set of challenges many times, most notably the condition of the community that they're in, which we'll get to in a minute. Now, when you talk about new construction versus existing, those are the two kinds of products that we offer here. Many times somebody comes to us where the clock is already ticking on a 1031 exchange.
Right.
As we know, you've got 180 days to fulfill that exchange. And on a property that hasn't started construction yet, we're going to blow right past that 180 days. You may not be eligible. So a built and already completed FIG deal that has tenants in it is something that works really well for an exchange and also from a risk standpoint. It's done. You have the tenants in it. You know what the rents are. You know what your interest rate's going to be. It's relatively predictable, but that comes at a cost. You're going to be paying the market cap rate. And typically in these markets where we operate, Boise, Houston, Salt Lake City, the market absorbs fourplexes at about a 5% cap rate. That means if you're the owner of a fourplex, you could back into a sales price that equals a 5% cap rate, and somebody's going to buy it. That's what that means. When you go pre-construction, you're typically able to get in at a cap rate in the mid to high sixes, possibly even 7%. Better cap rate equals better price, equals better cash flow, and it equals some equity too, because you were the investor that was willing to take that risk of bringing that asset, that raw dirt, all the way to a built and rented out fourplex. And the market likes that. The market recognizes some value. A lot of times people refer to that as forced appreciation. There's a lot of buzz out there right now, Keith, in the apartment world about value adds. I get calls every week. Hey, do you have anything that's value add, right?
That's right.
And traditionally, somebody means that I want a C-class apartment building that I can go in and refurbish all the units, raise all the rents, right? Well, you might be an investor that's a busy professional. In real estate, we often use a term called highest and best use, right? The highest and best use of your time might be your medical practice or your sales organization, and you don't have time to go do a value add on apartment complex or rehab homes. So this new construction method that we do is a cool way for you to do what we jokingly call an armchair value add. If you can talk to us, if you can use DocuSign and you can wire money, you do this armchair value add where you create cash flow and equity from day one because you took the risk out of the equation.
That's right. You can still be hands off and capture some of that, if you will, forced appreciation.
It's a way for you to navigate a little bit through this climate of compressed cap rates. And that goes back to if you go hire an agent to go look at fourplexes wherever you live, like I said, you're probably going to be underwhelmed because it really is kind of shocking what people are willing to pay for these assets. They sell for crazy amounts and they often have a ton of deferred maintenance that needs to be dealt with. This is a way for the busy professional that can't go get in the weeds, that doesn't want to roll their sleeves up and deal with all that drama, to still kind of beat the market by a little bit.
This is a great point. This is about adjusting your strategy as an investor and tailoring your strategy inside what the market will give you.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's not given a lot right now, right? But people are coming into real estate more and more, especially with people believing that the stock market is volatile. Is it going to fall off a cliff? They want that hard asset and they like the aspect of, I got multiple tenants. I'm going to use my loans better. So like I said, it's just a way to kind of beat that market a little bit. You're taking on a little bit of risk, right? When you look at that time from I close on a construction loan and I go vertical and I've got 10 to 12 months of going through construction. Well, key things can change in that 12-month window. Could rents not be exactly what you thought? Sure. Could interest rates not be exactly what you thought? Yep. There's a stabilization period, right? It's not like your units are rented from day one. So you have to get comfortable with those things within the market and know that, well, within this range, I'm pretty comfortable and I know I'm going to get an end result that I like. If you can't get comfortable with that, you probably got to go with an existing asset, but you're going to have to get comfortable with the fact that you're paying market at that point. So this is really just trade-offs. It's trade-offs.
So when you buy pre-construction, tell us more about how exactly that works. How exactly does an investor achieve a higher cap rate when they buy pre-construction rather than when it's already built?
So what happens here is when FIG does a deal, we're going to go in and we're going to buy, say, 15 acres, and we're going to subdivide that land to where, in theory, say, 50 fourplexes could be built on that. And it's all in a master plan community. Because one of the problems you have with these Fourplex projects from the 70s and 80s is that nobody's minding the store.
Right.
That guy starts parking his car on the lawn. They're hanging up weird curtains. They're letting their roof go. There's just stuff everywhere and nobody cares.
And there's no uniformity in that neighborhood.
And as a result, it just gradually deteriorates the value of the neighborhood. When you do it in a master plan community with an HOA, which we'll get into, you insulate against that. But what happens is, if we go to our builder arm of FIG, right, we've got a couple of different companies within the FIG companies, and we say, hey, you should build these 50 lots out and then we'll sell them. That's a spec. If the builder has to build it and then we cross our fingers that our investors are on the other side, the risk for the builder has to be priced into that. But if we come to them and we say, hey, this subdivision is sold, We have investors ready to go. We have them pre-approved for construction financing, which we do for you. We've got an arm that does that. That's a lot less risk to our builder. He's building something that's already sold, and therefore he delivers it at a lower price because he's got to give you something, right? For you to be crazy enough to go through that process, there's got to be a carrot on the other end. That's why it's able to generate a little bit better cap rate for the investor. Because if it was to be filled with tenants and then sold, now the risk is all gone at that point.
That's that risk-reward trade-off exactly right there. Now, you began to describe your projects physically. You don't go ahead and take on infill projects, which might mean just buying one vacant lot with other existing homes around it and putting one fourplex on that lot. Instead, your projects range from about 250 to 350 doors, and they're built as townhomes, but yet they're platted as fourplexes. So tell us more about that.
We've not done any infill projects. We might, right? If we can find enough land to where we could control and build a community. We don't want to be dictated to by the surrounding real estate unless it's to our advantage, right? So typically we're in the growing suburbs where we could buy land, and you're often going to find on a fig deal that there's a lot of other new construction going on around it. Other home builders are coming in and they're doing singles, or you may see some Class A apartments coming in, right? That's happening next to one of our Idaho projects and one of our Houston projects right now is we have Class A apartments on one side and then new homes on the other. And so that's a pretty frequent thing to come across. We've actually are going to start doing some of those stacked flat kind of condominium style fourplexes in a few places where the market justifies that, where that's what the local tenants want. But what we're more known for is what you alluded to is we do these townhouse style projects where you've got 4 townhouses in a row. So from a tenant's perspective, they're renting a 14 to 1700 square foot townhouse with a garage. That's what they're getting. And that's valuable to them. But from you, the investor standpoint, you're buying a fourplex. But from your lender standpoint, you're buying one property. That's where we can typically get a lot of these really good advantages from multiple pieces of the puzzle and blend them all together in one asset.
And that's where you as an investor can get those economies of scale by getting 4 doors under one Fannie Freddie golden ticket loan. Now, we mentioned townhomes, and just so it's understood by the listeners, we're talking about fourplexes where everyone has their own individual entrance to the outdoors. And therefore, you don't have this communal type of living like you do in what some would call up and down style fourplexes, where you have a common hallway, 2 units upstairs and 2 units downstairs. We're not talking about that. We're talking about townhomes. And that way, it feels a bit more like their own when you have that greater sense of privacy, your own garage and your own entrance to the outdoors. We're talking about these physically. Are there some other physical characteristics of the communities or the properties that you'd like to tell us about?
Like I told you, we're at this crossroads where a couple of different assets kind of come together. And it really depends on who you're talking to. Like I said, from the tenant's perspective, they might be living in a community. They might kind of think of it as a townhome complex, right? But there are some things that you have to do to try to get the best of both worlds here. And we've got a project that we're taking reservations on in Cypress, Texas right now, where across the street from us, there's a brand new Class A apartment complex. There's medical office, there's a Starbucks and McDonald's, a whole bunch of great stuff going on with amenities that our tenants can participate in.
Great.
That Class A apartment complex, though, if you were to go look at their pool and their amenities, it's going to look like the Ritz-Carlton, right? They build them really nice down there, but you're looking at units that are going to run you $2,500 a month or more for a 3-bedroom unit. So if you go across the street to us, you're going to get more square footage. You're going to get a townhouse. You're going to be more in the $1,600 to $1,700 a door rent range. And you're going to have a pool. It's not going to look like the Ritz-Carlton, but it's going to be nice. It's more of, it's the Hilton Garden Inn. So it's like, hey, this is a nice pool. It's good, clean, but it's affordable. And I really think that that's something that we're going to see more and more of a need of in the USA. There's a big widening gap between rich and poor, and there's going to be less and less people that can afford that $2,500 apartment, but they don't want to be at the bottom end in like a Section 8 asset. Nothing wrong with it. They want to have some amenities. So that's why we typically put a pool, little clubhouse, walking trails, a dog park. We're starting more and more. We do these zip lines for kids where they can get on them and zip line from one end to the other 50 yards or something, but they love it. And one of our Utah projects has its own Instagram account with people wrecking on the zip line. It's pretty good. We're trying to give a community feel with some amenities for people that can't afford that big Class A apartment budget.
That's right. When you're down substantially lower than that $2,500 a month rent rates, depending on which market you're in, you typically have a more recession resilient asset there as well. So you bring up master plan communities and HOAs, homeowners associations, are really, in general, I think kind of dirty words in the rental property market because people see an HOA or a condo association potentially controlling their investment or saying you have to have a certain number of owner occupants there. But with the way you structure your HOAs at FIG, it's not a dirty word. So tell us more about your HOAs and how they protect the community.
Yeah, in this case, the HOA is going to be your friend. And my primary residence is in an HOA, so I totally get that fear of, the busybody homeowner on the board that's making stupid decisions and endless special assessments and you have no control, right? I totally get that. I also appreciate that they don't let my neighbor park their old nasty RV on the street. There's a give and take on this HOA thing. But the way that FIG sets these up is we originally on the development side developed the CC&Rs and the bylaws for the HOA. And then when the project is done, it gets turned over to you, the investors. So the members of that HOA are you, the investors. You all typically have a common goal. We want a clean, safe development that's well maintained so that our units will rent out. There's 3 members that get elected and our HOA management company handles all of that so that we keep those costs low, but also do what the HOA needs to do. If you were to look at a FIG pro forma, and I'll give instructions on how to get those, Keith, but you're going to notice HOA dues on there, and you're also going to notice a vacancy and a maintenance and a insurance line item. And you're going to go, this is a $750,000 Fourplex. Why is the maintenance and the insurance line item so low? It's because most of the costs associated with those line items are actually baked into the HOA. So the HOA is actually responsible for all of the exterior maintenance of your building. Stucco needs to be repaired or some hardy board fell off or something like that. That's the HOA. Even right down to the roof replacement. You don't have to CapEx budget for roof replacement. That's on the HOA to do.
Got it.
They're going to do all the landscaping, pull weeds, take care of flower beds, remove snow, salt sidewalks. They cover the water, sewer, and garbage for the development. All of the units are metered out separately for gas and electric, and that's paid out for the tenants. So you have a uniform standard that's applied across the whole project. And of course, the HOA is also going to take care of those common areas like pools and clubhouses. And some of these have like gyms in their clubhouse as well. So the walls inside of the Fourplex is you and our property manager. Everything on the outside is the HOA. So many of those costs associated with insurance and maintenance are dealt with by the HOA. When you're dealing with shared walls, Keith, you cannot take the chance that the guy next to you doesn't have insurance. And so many of your listeners that live in condos or townhomes know, oh yeah, you're right. The HOA does pay for my master insurance policy. But it's a good idea to get a liability policy for the walls in. And those are a lot more affordable. And that's why that is pretty low on our pro forma, because you got to have that slip and fall policy for the inside or a pipe breaks on the inside. That's not the HOA's problem. So you should have a basic policy that's commonly called an HO6 to cover that. And we have insurance agents that can handle that and get those set up. I'm actually doing one right now. I'm closing on a refinance for Fourplex in Spring, Texas, and I'm just working on setting up my HO6 policy.
So just as much as the HOA protecting the community, it really protects you, the investor, from things like a boat covered in a blue tarp on the lawn. That's what the HOA does for you here. And you have a voice in it because you are a part of the HOA. Tell us more about the management of these properties. How does this work? Because we're talking about Fourplexes here for non-owner occupants, investor Fourplexes. Talk to us about the management in these various markets.
We've got a company that's part of the FIG group called Max Property Management, and they're licensed property managers and brokers in all 3 states where we operate. So this investing in a Fourplex through FIG, like I said, is for the busy professional that doesn't want to be bothered with the details. And that even applies to the lease up, the tenant placement and qualification and rent collection and all those kinds of things. So Max Property Management, the great thing about it that many of our clients find very useful is that they're officed right here in the Nerve Center in Provo, Utah. So when your unit is about to turn over, they coordinate with the construction side. They can do final walkthroughs for investors that can't make it to do their walkthrough. And what I think is really the best is that they coordinate the first year warranty. So you've got a 1-year warranty on your Fourplex. And even though a Fourplex is new, Keith, right? we all know that when you get somebody living in there, flushing the toilet, opening doors, right, living in that thing, some issues are going to come up. That stuff happens. And the great thing is those issues get reported to Max Property Management, who coordinates directly with the builder on that warranty repair. You don't have to get in the middle of that stuff. So you'll get your monthly statement through Appfolio, which is what we use for property management. And it might show basic plumbing repair, $150. And then below that, it'll be zeroed out as a builder warranty line item. That coordination between the final construction and the handoff is really useful, because even with Max being in-house, that can be tricky. But if it was a third-party property manager, it really gets tricky. And that's why a couple of years ago, we decided we got to bring this in-house. We got to be able to control this process for the investor.
So you operate in at least 3 different states. Tell us about those states. And then if one investor bought properties in multiple states, it's all under one management portal?
Exactly. It's all under one management portal. It makes it very easy. The fee structure will differ slightly, not a lot, between those markets, because there's different management standards that you have to adhere to in each market. I have investors that own in all 3 markets where we operate, and they're getting one summary statement every single month, and it's a pretty easy process as a result.
When Steve and I come back, we're going to talk about just exactly what markets they're in. The market is more important than the property, and just how much do these Fourplexes cost. You're listening to Get Rich Education. Our guest is Steve Olson from the Fourplex Investment Group. More when we come back. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold.
Would you like to know the easiest way to create wealth and passive income with real estate? This is Marco Santarelli with Norada Real Estate Investments. Now you can access the best deals without the stress or hassle of having to find, renovate, or manage those properties. We save you time by providing you with passive income investment properties in some of the best U.S. markets. Learn more by downloading your free copy of The Ultimate Guide to Passive Real Estate Investing. There's no obligation and nothing to buy. Simply visit passiverealestateguide.com and get your free copy today. That's passiverealestateguide.com.
Countless property investors get killed with maintenance costs, but that's far less likely when you buy brand new construction. Let me tell you about JWB Real Estate Capital in Jacksonville, Florida. They pioneered the build-to-rent model where you can invest in new construction, turnkey rental properties. That's why JWB was featured on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. To learn more and see inventory, go to newconstructionturnkey.com.
This is Rich Dad Advisor Tom Wheelwright. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold and don't quit your daydream.
You're listening to the show that's created more financial freedom for busy people just like you than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. We're talking with Steve Olson of FIG, the Fourplex Investment Group. The market's more important than the property. And I know at FIG, you really strategically choose high growth markets. You pay substantial attention to where people are moving within the United States. So tell us about those geographic markets that you're in.
Yeah, we're very strategic about that. I will say, though, in the spirit of full disclosure, the very first market we ever did, it's just kind of we fell up backwards into it, right? It was our home market here in Utah. And you don't have to look very far online to find excellent economic data for the state of Utah. I'm primarily focusing on the Wasatch Front, right? The Salt Lake City Metro is a long, skinny metro. It runs along the Wasatch Mountains. And so it includes Salt Lake City, Utah County to the south, Davis and Weber counties to the north. We're primarily in Salt Lake and Utah counties at this point in time. And very, very low unemployment rate. Very fast population growth. I think per capita, Utah had the fastest population growth in the country last year. Out of sheer numbers, it was Texas, which we'll get to in a minute. But very good population growth. And one thing that's really great and really conducive to what we're doing, Utah has the youngest population in the country. Very young population. A lot of people coming up through the ranks that are going to need affordable places to live. So we really love the market here. We're from here. And just kind of got this idea back in 2010 to do what we're doing. But since then, we were right place, right time.
Utah has both a substantial net in-migration and a birth rate that exceeds a death rate.
It's true. Yeah, I like the joke that we make all our own people here. We don't need to bring them in, but we are.
Homegrown.
Right? They're coming in like crazy. A lot of new companies making it to Utah. There's an area kind of straddles Salt Lake and Utah counties that jokingly a few years ago, at least I thought it was a joke, was referred to as Silicon Slopes. But now that's like a legit name. There's a whole committee for the planning of Silicon Slopes. So there's a lot of tech, but there's just a lot of diverse employment in Utah and a lot of jobs. And people like to stay here. You know, they're born here, like said, the youngest population, they want to stay. But they're coming in from the West Coast pretty frequently now as well.
Tell us about the other markets that you operate in.
So its little brother, and they would hate it if I said this, right? The Boise, Idaho. Yeah, I'm going to get some hate mail for that one. I'm totally sorry, guys. I didn't mean to say it like that, but I meant it in the context that I see Boise being where Utah was like 5 years ago, getting so much migration to the Boise area from the Pacific coast as well. And we see a diverse employment base and occupancy on apartments in Boise is in the high 90s everywhere in the metro right now. Affordable places to live is a big problem, and because of subcontractors, because of availability of land. So we've been very successful. We've really been loving Boise. That was the third market that we went into, and we have a project up there that I'll highlight in a few minutes that we're taking reservations in, and we're going through lease up right now in a project right off of Eagle Road in Meridian. Go ahead and look up Meridian, Idaho. I dare you, right? You will find good news about the economy and what's happening in the Boise market in general. So we love that one too. I can highlight as well the second market that we ever went into. It's different than both Salt Lake City and Boise, which is Houston. And people ask me all the time, why? Boise, Salt Lake, I get it. Then Houston, that's a kind of a weird curveball.
Yeah.
And we go into markets that fit our business model, but also most importantly, markets where we can actually operate, where we can hire the right people and run our business. And you can't just do that anywhere. We were able to accomplish that in the Houston market. And one thing that many people don't know is that Harris County, Texas, where Houston is consistently in the top 5 fastest growing counties in the nation. And I think for about an 8-year stretch, it was number 1. It just grows and grows and grows. And so it's funny, people ask me, well, what about hurricanes? I said, well, they don't care. It just keeps growing. And that answer needs to be more nuanced. We can visit about that. But it's a big, diverse economy. It's not that one-horse energy town that many people think it is. In fact, out of the 5 biggest employers in Harris County, only one of them is an energy company, and that's Exxon. So we really like that. I've got 2 Fourplexes going down there right now myself. And so Houston is more of an economy and a market that it didn't really have a boom, and consequently, it didn't really have a bust. It tends to perform more evenly with inflation and can be more predictable if you're sensitive to those paper losses that can come temporarily with the ownership of real estate.
When you have that much ballast and that much scale in a market as huge as Houston, you have a diverse economy, which is so important to the durability of an investor's income stream. They don't call the football team the Houston Oilers any longer because Houston is about so much more than oil.
That's right. Not any longer. I think it's just important to remember too, when you talk about Houston, it's hard to talk about all of it at once because it's so big. I mean, we're near 7 million people in the metropolitan area. You've got to have a sub-market conversation, right? When you talk about Houston, are you talking 100%. About downtown, the Galleria, Katy, the Woodlands? What are you talking about? Because they're all impacted by different things.
So tell us about the purchase prices of some of these. We're talking about new construction properties, and you, the investor, can take a look at those on their website. Tell us about how much it costs to purchase one of these.
Yeah, I can give you a range, and this stuff can vary a little bit based on floor plans. We do all these Fourplex communities in phases. So sometimes the price would fluctuate by phase and also location within the subdivision. So you could see duplexes. Sometimes we have duplexes, and I've got a couple of those in Texas right now for as low as about $360 for a duplex. And those units are just shy of 1,700 square feet per unit with 3 beds, 2.5 baths, and garages in a master plan community. So it's not your garden variety duplex. Then you could jump up into some of this stuff that we're about to announce in Utah, where we're doing some 2-bedroom models to hit that affordability component in the market a little bit more. And those would start in the high 600s, which we've not done for a long time. We've not sold a Fourplex in Utah for under 700 in a long time. So we're trying to hit that affordability component a little bit more. And then you start in Boise and Houston for your 3-bedroom townhome-style Fourplexes. You're going to be in the low 7s on your price. And then in Utah, when we get into those bigger townhomes, you're going to be into the high sevens now, is what you're most likely to see. So that would entail a 25% down payment plus your closing costs, and then also a year's worth of prepaid interest. For a construction lender to be willing to loan you money to build an investment property, they view that as a little riskier than a normal loan. And so they like to collect the interest up front. And that just goes into a reserve account at the bank. So as our builder draws against your construction financing, the bank can just automatically debit out the corresponding amount of interest for the month. So I tell people, look, you'd be anywhere from on a duplex right around 100,000 out of pocket with everything. For a fourplex, anywhere from 2 to 250, depending on floor plan and market. Does that make sense, Keith?
Yeah, and you discussed the cap rate. So to give the listener a relative sense on how much income might be generated, talk to us from a rent to value ratio perspective. How much monthly rent is generated from these properties generally as a proportion of the total purchase price?
In Texas, you're going to see a little bit higher rent per door. You're going to see a rent to value ratio of close to 1 there. But remember, in Texas, you have higher property taxes. Tax. Yeah. Whereas in Utah and Idaho, you get to be 0.7, but you have much lower property taxes. So the cap rate does tell that story because it's pretty similar spread out across those 3 markets, because it's kind of amazing how efficient markets are. They find that equilibrium between expenses and income, and they've done so here.
That's right. Well, you have an awful lot going on at FIG. You have both existing projects, and tell us about the availability there, and then tell us about what's coming up next for FIG.
I'll just start chronologically here so investors can kind of see what's happening right now and projecting out into kind of the intermediate future. But we've got a project in Cypress, Texas called Starwood Farms. I have a Fourplex in there personally. I think I barely first started talking about this when you and I began recording. We had the land under contract, and now we're under construction in the first couple of phases there. So I've got some stuff in the latter phases that would start construction later this year, if you like that Houston market.
That's Northwest Houston.
Yeah, Northwest Houston, right along Highway 290, which is great. They've just finished expanding Highway 290. You can get downtown from there. You can drive out to Austin. It's right on that. That's the road that goes to Austin. So I would encourage you to research growth in Northwest Houston. You'll like what you find out. And one thing that many people really appreciate about that particular project, if you're one of those that really looks into the schools and the school district, you'll love what you see on greatschools.org about this project. The local high school, Cy-Fair High, gets a 10 out of 10 on greatschools.org. That generally means, hey, this is a place where people are going to want to live. Right? It's a good sign.
I spent a few nights in Northwest Houston this year. I can attest to the fact that it's bustling. Almost everything in the area is new.
Yes, right, exactly. I think the median age of homes there in Cypress is 2002 and later, right? I mean, it's a pretty new area. So You'll find that if you get to make it out to Cypress one day. So that's happening in Texas. Here in the next 45 days or so, we're going to announce a project in Payson, Utah. Payson is on the south side of Salt Lake County, and we'll begin construction on that one here in February. So by the time your listeners check this out, we'll probably be ready to start taking those reservations. If they like Utah County, we'll have some options for them. And right on its heels, we haven't said this to anyone yet. I know people are going to go bananas for this one. We have one in Provo, Utah. It's going to be at a little bit lower projected cap rate, but there's a reason. And that's because it's in the federal opportunity zone. And you should definitely research that with your accountant, your attorney. This one is in the federal opportunity zone, and we believe it'll qualify because typically to get into an OZ, and what I can't stress enough, talk to your accountant about this, but you have to spend in improvements at least what you spent on the property, which lends itself really great to the FIG model because you close on land, and then yes, you do spend that in improvements. So that'll be coming up in the opportunity zone, construction starting probably in May of 2020 on that one. We're excited to announce our 4th market as well. We've been working on this one for a long time, and that is the Phoenix, Arizona metro.
Yeah, the big reveal.
Yeah, the big reveal. We love Phoenix, and it is not the economy that it was in 2005. That economy is much deeper and more broad now. Back in 2005, what led to the housing crisis in Phoenix was largely a construction-dependent economy, and it's just not that anymore. So we really love it down there. We've got land under contract in Surprise, Arizona, which is on the west side of the Phoenix metro. We'll announce that one here in the next 30 to 45 days. Construction probably beginning early fall of 2020. And then on its heels, one that's kind of more of an affordability component, a stacked flat in El Mirage, Arizona, which is just to the east of Surprise. So those are coming. And then we've got a second phase of our projects in Nampa, Idaho and Meridian, Idaho that we'll announce at the beginning of 2020. Construction starting midway through 2020 as well. So pretty excited about all of those. A lot of doors coming online. Like I said, we really feel like affordable housing is a big deal, is needed. Builders have not been keeping up. The rising millennial generation, for the most part, does not want to buy houses. They want to rent. They don't want to be tied down. And we're trying to get in front of that demographic swell that, well, I think it's already here, but it's just going to continue to get bigger and bigger.
Yes, that affordable segment is so substantially undersupplied. People like FIG. They like your model. No wonder you're growing and having projects all over, seemingly. One of the tax benefits you mentioned was that of the opportunity zones in Utah, but we also think about the cost segregation and how that offers some great benefits for year one bonus depreciation available through the still relatively new Trump tax law. Tell us about how people are taking advantage of that with FIG projects.
That's a really cool one. And you know, if you thought I laid it on thick with the tax disclaimer, I'm going to lay it on even thicker. You got to talk to your CPA about this because this affects every investor differently. Some of you are real estate professionals on your tax returns. Others are, you own rental real estate, but you've got to take those depreciation losses passively because you don't qualify as an active investor yet. In any case, as it's been explained to me by a variety of accountants, cost segregation still has its benefits. But where it really gets good, especially if you're a real estate professional, is as follows. And once again, check with your CPA because I'm not giving tax advice here. This is just some guy explaining it. Okay. So as you know, Keith, you can take depreciation over 27 and a half years on the vertical improvements of your property. You've never had a water heater in any of your properties last 27 and a half years, though. Neither have I.
That's right.
I'm making the point here that much of the personal property within the building, it can be depreciated over a faster period. So there's an industry out there called cost segregation. You can hire a cost segregation specialist to come in and do a study on your building. And we have one that works with us at FIG that gives a good group rate because many of our clients do this. And so they're going to go do this study and they're going to say, well, you can take a flooring depreciation of X amount of dollars over 5 years, cabinetry over this period, right? Mechanicals over that period. And really what they do is they cram much of that depreciation into 5, 10, and 15-year periods for your taxes, which is great. You say, hey, I can take it much earlier. That's a bigger tax deduction that I can take. And if you're a passive investor, that accumulates in your bucket faster. If you're active, wow, it is really lowering your tax liability every year. But here's where it gets kick it up a notch further. Through the new Trump tax law, they have some pretty significant benefits on what they call year one bonus depreciation, where you can essentially take those 5, 10, and 15-year line items and cram them all into year one. It is awesome. I've shared many times a study that the cost seg people shared with me. One of our clients, I think he's in about a 42% tax bracket, must live in California, right? After you take into account the state and the feds, he's in that 42, but he saved $35,000 in taxes on one fourplex by front loading his depreciation. I'm not saying you can do that. You might be able to. You got to get with your CPA, but he was able to take all that into year one. And I'm not talking about lowered his taxable income. I'm talking about his tax bill went down $35,000. I mean, what does that do to your ROI, your ability to save and invest more capital? So it really adds a lot of juice to an asset that I'd be buying anyways. But now a big reason why I do these is, wow, I pay so much less in taxes by doing cost segregation on new construction.
Yeah, I don't know if bonus depreciation is a reason to do a deal because you get so many other benefits with real estate investing. But yeah, it's definitely a sweetener to the deal. And I sure know a lot of investors that have reduced their tax liability to a jaw-dropping extent with the bonus depreciation. Well, Steve, before we go and we let people know how they can learn more about your projects, you mentioned you have some duplexes before, so fourplexes really are what you're most known for, but do you have a few other new construction asset types in addition to fourplexes?
Yeah, so what happens a lot of times, Keith, is when we have a site plan that we're working on with the engineers and we're going to make a proposal to the county, sometimes we can get, for density purposes, maybe like 10 townhomes in a row. Well, 10 is not divisible by 4. It's Friday. I'm not good at math, but I know 10 is not divisible by 4. Okay. And what that equates to is we're going to do 2 fourplexes and then 1 duplex on the end. So we usually get a couple of those in every project. So for an investor that wants to dip their big toe in and try this out from a duplex standpoint, they can do that. And then in other cases, we actually go bigger. We're about to close on construction loans for some 20-plex buildings in Magna, Utah. Our project there called Colony Farms. In fact, I have a fourplex left in that project that fell out of contract if you want a fourplex that can start like next month. But yeah, we do 20-plex buildings. And so we're looking into having a little bit of variety. We found our most successful subdivisions have a variety of product available for the tenants. We've got some 1-bedroom, 2 and 3 bedrooms, and then some townhouse style and some stacked flat style. It just looking in the rearview mirror back, that is best for a long-term healthy development. And then it's good because we've got stuff for all kinds of investors that way.
Well, affordable housing is an underserved housing need these days in the United States, but fourplexes really, I think, are an underserved investor niche in the United States. So let our listeners know how they can learn more about you and get started with looking at your project, Steve.
Yeah, it's pretty easy, right? If you want to be a lurker and just kind of look around before you talk to us, totally fine. We want you to get educated. Just go to our website, www.fig, like the fruit, .us, fig.us. We've got a bunch of educational videos and examples of past projects, what we're working on now, educate you on the process. So there's some good stuff on fig.us that you can familiarize yourself with. And there's a contact us form on there too. So just go reach out and let us know Keith sent you over, that you heard us on the podcast. If you want to start talking about this, sometimes investors reach out to us and they're ready right away and we've got something. Other times there's a fair amount of education and dialogue that needs to happen. Sometimes we need to get on a conference call with your CPA. We need to talk through 1031 exchanges and how the timing of that can work on a FIG deal. So we're happy to strategize with you, let you know what's coming up. Our job is to let you know what we're doing and make sure you understand it. And if you feel like it's right for you, we'd love to have you.
Again, you can get started at fig.us. Steve Olson, it's been great having you back on the show.
Thanks again, Keith.
Oh yeah, a lot of terrific, thought-provoking material from Steve Olson today. And don't you love Steve's voice and his way of explaining things? I think that there's something about it. It's not just his knowledge, it's also his voice. When you listen to him, it's kind of like, yeah, I think everything's going to be all right because I'm dealing with Steve here. So FIG really offers something that I think is most efficient for a busy professional type of investor. And most times it's a more patient investor dollar, where this begins with a construction loan and then converts to a long-term hold type of regular loan or conventional loan. Some people are sitting on a lot of cash today, and here in a day where stock markets have run up faster and higher than real estate markets in the 10 years since the Great Recession, some savvy people want to move their dollars over into a real asset. And you can really do that with some scale here. Down payment, prepaid interest, and closing costs could be a $700,000 investment on 3 fourplexes, all the way down to perhaps just 1 duplex. I can tell you that at FIG, there is a high repeat investor rate. People like what they're doing here. To protect your investment, they've got well thought out HOAs where the investor is an HOA member. You've got control. And then to keep tenants happy, besides the townhouse-style dwelling, there are substantial amenities and a clubhouse, walking trails, a dog park, and just really a high degree of resident livability. 2 big reveals with what FIG is doing today in Provo and their new market in the Phoenix Metro. In Provo, a potential opportunity for you in an opportunity zone. Often you have to be a developer to get the opportunity zone benefit, and FIG has found a way where you can potentially get the benefit and yet outsource the development. For all that and more, including seeing just what some of their projects really look like or reaching out to them, start at fig.us. Until next week, I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.